Okay, hello everyone. Can you all hear me okay? All right, welcome. My name's Leah Zickmund. I am the executive director here at Hourglass. So happy to see you all and be in person after our little July hiatus. We always take July off, but it's great to be back. Who here is at their first Hourglass First Friday Forum? Lovely. Okay. Just a bit about us. We focus on quality of life issues across Lancaster County. Some of these specifically include the environment, city vitality, growth and land use, and public education. So you'll see that reflected in our programming. We are a membership-based organization. So I just wanted to take a second and remind you all, we are coming into the season where we ask folks to renew their membership. If you want to get ahead of it, feel free to. You can always do it online. Otherwise, you'll get a letter from me reflecting on the year. I wanted to take a moment to do that with you all now as well, because we have had such a cool year at Hourglass, and I'm really proud of the things that we've been able to do. We started the fiscal year with a board retreat where we focused on strategic planning and kind of what our vision would be. We started collaborating with new organizations like Next Generation of Lancaster. We have a couple of their leaders front and center here today. We also started our very first board fellowship, which is a specific initiative to get some younger folks involved in the leadership of Hourglass. And Coco Fulton from Fulton Private Bank joined the Hourglass board this year. We focused on artificial intelligence in education, specifically in Lancaster County, and heard from different educators. And so I'm really, really proud of the year that we've had, and I'm so excited to enter a new one and hopefully bring you all along with us. Today is a very relevant topic and one that we know our members are extremely interested in hearing updates about. We just recently did a membership survey and got some really fabulous responses. I will constantly say I am so proud of the group that we have here at Hourglass, because people gave really thoughtful, intentional responses to the questions we were asking about. Are we remaining nonpartisan? Are we focusing on things that you want to learn about? And you all gave really, really great feedback. So more on that at a later date. But we have some great speakers here with us today that I want to introduce real quick. We have Chad Martin, Executive Director of Chestnut Housing and also co-chair of the Coalition for Sustainable Housing. Hello, welcome. And we have Samantha Gray, who is the first director of the Coalition for Sustainable Housing. We were just talking about this before we started today, that she started in May of last year. So it's been about a year and change since her role. And I'm really excited to learn about the work that they've done, and I imagine you all are too. So they'll be talking to you all today about their countywide zoning reform campaign, and then also doing a little bit of message testing with you all. So you'll notice you're in a different seating position than you normally are. We usually do the U. I thought maybe having people at tables might help for just kind of collaborating and talking and helping them with some of that message testing. So before we dive in today, I also want to thank our sponsors, Rogers and Associates, Millersville, and the Ware Center for our lovely space. I'm very happy to be back in here now, and Shoemaker for our live streaming services. And with that, I will welcome you both up here to begin.
Welcome. Well, we already had an introduction, but I'll introduce myself anyway. Hello, my name is Samantha Gray, and I am the director of the Coalition for Sustainable Housing. As Leah mentioned, through the generosity of the High Foundation about 15 months ago, we were able to kind of, I'll call it a beta test, to see what the impact of having a director for the Coalition would have. The Coalition has been around for over a decade, lovingly held together by volunteers. We have some founding members in the room. I believe Commissioner D'Agostino. We have Kate Zimmerman here, who's also been part of it for a long time. And we also have Gastineau. I knew I was going to forget because I had the old one, who's also on our steering committee here. So really grateful to be here and appreciate the opportunity. And I'll turn it over to Chad real quick to introduce himself.
I'm Chad with Chestnut Housing, and I co-chair the coalition currently with Shelby Nauman. Many of you know Shelby. She leads Tenfold and has been, my goodness, at the helm of the coalition for a long, long time, probably going back to being on staff at LHOP with Commissioner D'Agostino. Just to add a little bit of color to kind of the trajectory we've been on, and then Samantha will say much more digging into what our current work is at the Coalition. But I think if I'm getting the history right, which is hard when you have the founder in the room, what the history is, but if I'm remembering right, somewhere around like coming out of the Great Recession, LHOP, which has since merged with Tabor Community Services to create Tenfold, LHOP had launched what I think is probably the first kind of modern housing study in Lancaster County, looking at what is our housing need, and the Coalition then kind of formed out of that to be a more broad-based advocacy arm to figure out how do we move our community forward around housing needs. And, you know, anyone who has done this kind of work as a kind of off the side of your desk role while you have a full-time day job may know that coalition work, when it's completely volunteer driven, is maybe a lot of committed folks, but it also is really hard to rally the kind of energy to really make lasting long-term change. So I would say for a lot of those years, the Coalition did an effective job of things like responding when current projects were kind of in the news and up for important approvals, to try to help bend public perception in a pro-housing direction with some of those projects, try to raise awareness across the county around our housing needs. But I think was somewhat limited in our capacity to really do a full-blown kind of how do we work together as a community to push forward this agenda of just creating more housing choices, more creative housing solutions for our community. So that's the journey we've been on the last couple of years with Samantha. It is proving to be, in fact, tremendously helpful to have a paid staff person who happens to be a very capable paid staff person to guide this work. So she'll dig into that much more. But what you're seeing today is the work that we have been on a trajectory for a number of years working toward that will hopefully position us to really be leading a countywide kind of campaign around some pro-housing solutions coming in the next few months. I think we really started to see that at the Coalition over the last few years, that we could be doing lots of piecemeal things, but there's no kind of single entity in Lancaster County position to push forward a real public-facing campaign around how do we raise public awareness around what may be making housing unaffordable in our community. How do we raise public awareness around potential solutions? And then how do we all work together with our municipal leaders to kind of impact what we can at the local level? There are lots of things we can't impact, and we'll talk about that some today, but how can we impact things at the local level to start to make some change? So that's the kind of campaign we're working toward, and really excited to have Samantha leading the way with that.
Thanks, Chad. So just an overview of what we're going to talk about today, but just wanted to let you all know a little bit about us. We have now over 160 members of the Coalition representing developers, nonprofit organizations, housing providers. We have advocates, residents, realtors, elected officials, municipal staff, planners, business leaders, and community organizations. And we're really proud of that diversity, and that diversity is important because housing affects every sector and it requires collaboration across many different perspectives. As Chad mentioned, our role has always been to bring people together to build shared understanding and identify practical solutions to expand housing choices. And while education and relationship building remain important, our work really has started to evolve towards implementation and action. So over the past year, we focused much of our work on listening to municipalities and community leaders, and we wanted to hear more about their challenges and where they saw opportunities. So that work is informing, as Chad mentioned, our new campaign. We're calling it Neighbors for Housing, and that focuses on supporting municipalities. So I'll talk a little later about the direct resources that we're developing, but also helping educate residents on the connection between zoning and housing choice, and also building broader public awareness. So our goal today, as Leah mentioned, isn't a Housing 101 presentation. We want to share a little bit about how we got to where we are today and do some message testing with you and see if we're on the right track.
But wait, Samantha, if you are looking for Housing 101, where can you turn?
Oh, so we just launched and had our first successful series, Housing Advocacy 101, where we brought together community residents and helped explain kind of where we are now with housing and how individuals can help shape the conversation in their local municipalities. And we have 2 more of those coming up. We're going to do one in Manheim Township. We're also going to do one with Community Mennonite Church. And if you'd like to have it in a neighborhood near you, let me know, and we'd be happy to bring that to you as well. Great. Thank you. So why we started with listening. We really wanted to understand how communities view housing and the challenges they were navigating. Over the past year, we've talked with township supervisors, we've met with borough officials, planning commissions, community partners, nonprofit organizations, leadership, and we asked what they were seeing and what questions they were wrestling with and what resources would actually be the most valuable and helpful for them. Across those meetings, there were several themes that have kind of come up over and over again, and they're really guiding much of the resources that we're developing. And while every community is unique, several consistent themes have emerged. And the first is that housing is becoming everyone's issue. It's not just the housing sector. Employers are talking about workforce recruitment and retention. Older adults are looking for opportunities to downsize and stay in their communities. Young adults and young families are struggling to stay in the places where they grew up. We also heard a strong desire to preserve community character. Most municipal leaders weren't asking how to prevent or stop growth. They were asking how to manage growth thoughtfully. Communities were also interested in exploring solutions, but one examples from peer municipalities we constantly heard, show me where this works someplace else. Give me an example of another municipality that's taking this on. And so the other thing too that we learned is a lot of conversations began with concerns or assumptions. And so that also led us to believe that awareness building, education, and having local examples was a really important part of this work. Your next chip.
All right. I want to tack on just a couple things to what Samantha just shared, a couple anecdotes around what we're hearing. When she mentioned that this is like a universal issue, I imagine this is true in a way that folks in the room understand, but I am just increasingly kind of surprised everywhere I go talking about housing that every single person has a story about someone who's wrestling with housing affordability. Now, I work in affordable housing. The organization that I serve focuses on folks who are at the lowest kind of income bracket in the community. So a lot of my headspace every day is about those who are like in most acute need. But I would say the stories that catch me almost the most about this and that I think are really relevant when we start talking about creative solutions, when we start talking about housing choices in our community and how things like zoning have in the past limited those choices and opportunities. I think of folks like literally yesterday, I walked out of a community meeting and I was talking with a local business leader who was driving an amazing car. It was like a 1968 Olds 98 convertible. And I'm like, please tell me about your car. And he went on and we started talking about housing. He's like, yeah, I'm in my 60s. I have adult kids. He's a successful business owner, like multi-business owner, does lots of things in his community. The kind of person that we all think of as like kind of making it in our community. He was telling me about his adult kids who can't figure out how to buy a home in Lancaster County. And those are the stories that catch me more and more, because when we get to a place where folks in their 30s can't figure, who are working like decent jobs in our community, can't figure out where they can find a foothold to kind of latch on to the American dream that we've all bought into around home ownership, then we really have something that's not just like an affordable housing crisis for folks who are struggling at the bottom. It's like a community-wide sort of crisis. So those are the folks that I have in mind when we talk about wonky things like zoning and housing choices that might seem like really abstract policy choices, but when those policy choices mean the average home is over $350,000 in Lancaster County. So how do you like buy that when you're in your 30s? Another data point that's been sitting with me this year is that across the state of Pennsylvania and nationally, the average age of a first-time home buyer has risen by about 10 years over the last 30 years. So meaning 30 years ago in the 1990s, first-time home buyers on average were in their early 30s. Now they're pushing 40. The American dream doesn't work nearly as well when you lose 10 years of equity in your home, right? So that's what we're talking about here. Not to make that too heavy, but just to kind of like bring that home. I imagine if we like took time to go around every table, just raise a hand if you know a story, something like that. Yourself, someone you know, neighbor, friend, family member. Yeah, okay, so we're all on the same page. That's what our goal here is, to have a community where that's no longer the case and folks really have entry points across the income spectrum. All right, so turning more to like, so what does that mean from a more wonky perspective? So why do municipalities matter in this? I bet folks in this room, you all are smart. You know what some of the answers are here. Municipalities influence a lot that has to do with how we build housing. They by no means influence everything. There are lots of macroeconomic factors that are really important, that are maybe even some of the most important factors. Things like interest rates, kind of what typical wages are in our community. Lots of things like that impact the general state of the stock market. All of those sorts of things impact building costs, impact it. Municipalities obviously don't really have influence over any of those, but they do have influence over some really key things. So when we think about what kind of leverage points we have at the local level, there are some really key things that municipalities influence. They influence zoning and land use. We'll talk a little bit more about that today. They obviously administer nearly every permitting process. There are some state and federal things that come into play, but they administer many of the permitting processes needed, including like how long it takes to approve those permits. Do they have adequate staff to actually do that? Are they communicating clearly? If you're a builder, for example, do you know who to call when you have a building permit that you're waiting for? That is an issue that may seem like it should be simple, but if any of you built anything in the last 5 years, not always an easy answer to questions that seem like they should be simple. Municipalities obviously influence a lot of infrastructure decisions and requirements in their community, and they influence a lot. This is tied very closely to zoning and land use, but they influence a lot about what type of housing can be built in their community. So our goal is to work with our local municipalities on these issues. I will say in Pennsylvania, as many of you know, this is a particularly unique situation in our state. Neighboring states on the East Coast have some similar dynamics, but we have a unique situation with the number of individual municipalities we have in Lancaster County. But everybody in the room knows this. We have something like, how many do we have, Ray? Like 60 in Lancaster County. And I believe Lancaster Planning Department has said that adds up to something like 500 different zoning districts across Lancaster County. Which just means when you think about, John says it's higher. More than 500 is the phrase we'll use today. We have more than 500 different zoning categories and districts in Lancaster County. And you might hope that like R3, residential 3, means the same thing in this municipality as it does in this, but it does not. And so we're all working at that together. The county planning department is doing a lot of work around that, but this is kind of in the weeds stuff that even many municipal officials don't always have a full understanding of kind of what's in the weeds of their zoning code. So those are the things we're working at with our local leaders. All right. I'm pretty sure I'm not attached to the script at all that you gave me, Samantha. So she probably had a whole other list of things I was supposed to say about these slides.
You're fit.
So what municipalities can do, we've been talking about this. They can find ways to creatively expand housing choices. And when we say housing choices, some examples of the kinds of things that we're exploring through the coalition that I think many folks in our community are asking for, and that I think many folks in other communities around the country and around the Commonwealth have been pursuing with effective strategies that do in fact create new opportunities for kind of housing attainment, housing choice, housing affordability for their communities. Those are new solutions like ADUs, which means accessory dwelling units, or granny flats. In Lancaster County, we actually have many sort of almost ADU opportunities on the books that are typically meant to be for it's often referred to as eco housing in Lancaster County. It's meant to be for family members, maybe aging family members that you can build. The challenge in Lancaster County is who gets to decide what's family, and maybe more importantly, why is it somehow more successful if that's a family member than a friend or someone in need of housing that you maybe didn't know before but could become a new friend? Why is it important that it's a family member, and why must it be temporary? Many of our ordinances have kind of temporary requirements. So advocating more broadly for ADUs, advocating to build things like duplexes and even triplexes and quadplexes by right in more places. In Lancaster County, we had Matt Hoyer on the county planning department team kind of do an analysis of anywhere where you can build residentially in Lancaster County. So that's not just residential, that includes mixed use, that includes some agricultural land, things like that. Anywhere you can build residentially in Lancaster County, something like about 60 to 65% of those parcels, you are only allowed to build a single family detached home. The numbers look about like that across the country as well. Something like 2/3 to 3/4 of parcels across the country, you can only build a single family detached home. That can be a wonderful housing solution for many people and may be appropriate for many places, but it is certainly not the only type of housing that works successfully for people, right? I imagine many of us in the room have lived at some point in something other than a single family detached home and may even be desiring to live in something other than a single family detached home, but we have really limited options for where we can build. Advocating also for, I would say, some other options not listed here. Solutions like being able to build multifamily housing, meaning apartment buildings by right in many commercial districts. That's another thing we're advocating for. I think our developer friends who are doing kind of mid-sized to larger housing developments have a lot of questions about why there isn't more true mixed-use development space in Lancaster County. Let's see, what else? And then we have things like modernizing regulations, making good projects easier, planning for the future. A couple things I'll just tack on that are ancillary to this, but certainly interrelated. Every township has both a zoning ordinance, which says kind of what you can build and kind of where you can build it in terms of like dimensions and things like that. Every municipality also has a subdivision and land development ordinance. Certainly these two work hand in hand. Anyone who has developed real estate of any kind knows that your land development requirements can be just as much of a sort of sticky wicket as zoning requirements. So we certainly see opportunities for improvement and change in a more pro-housing direction in both of those kinds of ordinances. All right, just to name some things that Samantha called this conversations we continue to have. Some of these, I think the we is like literally across the country, we're having these kind of conversations that are a little bit of like appropriate debate to be having within this kind of general push toward how do we have more housing options in our communities while making our way toward that kind of goal. There's some important kind of debates and conversations to consider. Things like how much do you work toward preserving the character of what is versus modernizing and building to meet growth demands and opportunities for kind of new residents in one's community. If you've been to any public meeting where housing development was being considered, this is like an internal debate that's going on in almost every situation, and certainly a worthy conversation. But we'll say kind of sideways from this, our county planning department has done some really good work in this direction, but I think we all have work to do in Lancaster County to be able to have nuanced conversations about how we can both preserve farmland and build dense housing that meets the growth needs of our community. Many times it is kind of laid out as though we are choosing one or the other. And in fact, what has been demonstrated over and over is if we build in smart ways with high enough density in the right places, we are ultimately preserving more farmland in our community. But I get it. When you're looking at actually like this field right in front of me in my community being potentially developed into dense housing, it may feel like that's a loss for land preservation in Lancaster County. So I think we all have a responsibility to try to find some more nuanced ways to talk about this. And that's some of the message testing we'll get into. Some other kind of worthy conversations to be having along the way. Things like how much local government influence do we have over these various factors? Right now, this is a conversation going on among our state legislators in Pennsylvania as well. Both the House and the Senate have a number of bills on the table that would actually use our state's municipal planning code to override local control on some of these issues, trying to seek more housing choice and more housing opportunity across the Commonwealth. That's a great debate to have, right? And I imagine we all have kind of different ideas about how much this should be state control versus local control. So that's a conversation that's going on right now in Pennsylvania. And certainly things like infrastructure and kind of what the limits of infrastructure are, when and how we make major investments on the infrastructure side, meaning things like roads, water, sewer. I was just earlier this week in a conversation with someone. There's a site that's been looked at for a number of years in Lancaster County for a more kind of rural location for some affordable housing development, and water and sewer access is a major obstacle. Everything else lines up for it to be a great site, but water and sewer access is a major obstacle. So at what point does a local municipality have responsibility to make those upgrades? At what point does a developer have responsibility to participate in that? Those are great conversations to have. And then, my goodness, democratic participation. Sometimes democratic participation is really helpful when our goal is building more housing, and sometimes it may not be so helpful if folks aren't well informed about the kinds of issues we're talking about today. I think, legitimately, sometimes neighbors have real concerns about change and development in their communities, and sometimes they're just pushing back because they don't like change. And how much do we honor that in a kind of democratic American way of making decisions? I think at this point, I'm handing it back to Samantha.
Thanks, Chad, for all that information. So with all of that in mind, what we've been hearing from community members, what we've been hearing from municipalities, understanding what can actually change and what impact residents can actually have, we've started to really think about messaging and communication. And that's why we have started the Neighbors for Housing campaign. And part of what we're doing is trying to develop some one-pagers, some explainers that folks can have that kind of demystify some of these things, toolkits for municipalities who are interested in taking on some of these challenges, and also really launching a public awareness campaign and doing some of the work, like I mentioned, around public awareness building and this housing advocacy 101 courses that we've been developing. In fact, Carol was at one of them. She was part of our inaugural group. So that's kind of what we're trying to do. And as we're doing that, we're having some key messages that are driving all of that work. And we know that one message won't resonate with everyone. People come to this conversation with different values and different experiences. So we're not really interested in, is this the right message? But is this a message that will open up more communication, that will bring curiosity, that will bring more people together? So as we run through some of these, I want you to think about the people that you already interact with, the people that are in your communities. Will it resonate with them? Are these things that I can see myself in that? Can you see your municipal leaders, your elected officials kind of latching on to some of these? And maybe what you would lead with or what feels personally connected to you. Before I go through those message themes, though, this is kind of our overarching message. And rather than focusing on housing shortages or policy first, we really wanted to have a narrative that focused on Lancaster County's future. And we wanted to have this idea that strong communities depend on people being able to continue to live and work and contribute to the places and spaces they already are, right, where they are now. We also, as Chad mentioned, want to be able to bridge the conversation with preservation and expansion. So how can we do that responsibly? And also that thoughtful growth and community preservation can work together, as I mentioned. So as I go through some of these messages, what we'll do is I'll go through them one at a time. I'll ask you to reflect on them. Please share any feedback out loud. It'll be the community participation part of the program. And we just welcome your feedback as we go through. We're actually live in the process now. We've just kind of turned over some of these message themes to, we're working with an organization called Message Agency to help us develop some of these pieces of collateral and some of the public awareness campaigns. So your input here is going to be incredibly valuable. So our first message theme is housing choices for every stage of life. This really focuses on people and the different housing needs that we all experience through life. One of the strongest things that we heard as we were talking to folks is that housing isn't just about first-time homebuyers or young adults. It's really about creating housing for everyone, from young adults to families, older families to workers. As I mentioned, housing choice allows people to remain connected to the communities where they already live and work. And we also found, as Chad mentioned, that this really resonates with folks because they can see themselves or someone they know. So my question for you all is, does this message feel relatable and does it create common ground? Any thoughts or reflection? Does this feel relatable? Does it create common ground? How do we feel about this message, right? Everyone can see themselves in it in some way. Expands, it crosses time frames. People are saying you can see it across a lifespan, connects to people. Yes. So the idea is these messages really are broad-based. So these are intended, it's kind of like think of it as an arc or an umbrella of messages, and then we can tailor to specific audiences. So these are kind of the broad-based messages that we think can touch whether you're a municipal leader, an elected official, whether you're a community member. So we might tailor them a little more specifically as we do some one-pagers or toolkits, but broadly these connect to people across the kind of spectrum of stakeholder groups. So having some more messaging around folks that might need special assistance or have special needs. Yeah. Might be something missing from the messaging. So this next message, we talked a little bit about preserving what we value. So one of the biggest kind of things that we heard, again, we talked about this, is how can preservation and growth kind of coexist together. We heard, as Chad mentioned, across the spectrum, folks being concerned about protecting farmland, preserving community character, and directing growth thoughtfully. So we really want to frame the conversation as suggesting that thoughtful housing choices can actually support preservation goals. It emphasizes using land that's already designed or designated for growth, building in existing communities, investing in existing communities, and protecting the places that people value most. So really, rather than framing housing as change for change's sake, it really frames housing as part of good community stewardship. So how does this message resonate when you think about folks that are concerned, whether they're residents or municipal leaders, but folks that are concerned about growth and preservation?
Yeah, that's an interesting point that we may want to think about, because Samantha, is to not overstate this message. It sounds as though we don't need investments around the structure. We don't ever need to change things like those boundaries. I think there will be needs for those to meet our housing needs, but aren't that bigger than preservation goals as well?
Yeah. Our third message theme is strong communities need housing. So this really connects housing to the long-term health of Lancaster County. Housing supports employers, local businesses, schools, community organizations, and communities thrive when people of different ages, incomes, and occupations can live locally. It also intentionally broadens the conversation beyond housing to include economic development, workforce, and quality of life. And it also reinforces the fact that future generations should have the opportunity to live here in the county. So we're wondering again how this message feels, how it resonates. Does it feel broad enough? Does it address some of the concerns that we had earlier about, folks that maybe don't fit into the stages of life at the exact moments that we think of them and the exact ways we think of them?
I don't know if it fits here or another messaging, but I think, at the federal level, a lot of fair housing is being stripped away, like protections and oversight. So I think that's something that needs to be in some messaging, is protecting, fair housing rights and making sure that it's equitable and accessible to anyone who wants to rent or buy a home. And then another one is supporting generational housing. So making sure that people have the means, the knowledge, the legal rights to pass down, that family equity to the next generation. So making sure that they're not being taken advantage of or having a short sale or those types of things to protect that generational equity.
Yeah, thank you for that feedback. Our fourth and final theme is, again, part of what Chad was talking about, that local decisions shape our futures. And really, this is kind of emphasizing the key role that municipalities and residents play, right? So it reinforces that many decisions are made locally and that communities likely already have some tools where they can implement some practical housing choice solutions. It also highlights that meaningful change often happens through small incremental steps rather than sweeping reform. And it reinforces that local education and community engagement are really essential to making good decisions. So again, it's not necessarily about housing itself, but how local leadership and community members, residents can have some responsibility in the process. So do we think that folks can see that in this message, that they have a responsibility in the housing discussions and decisions that are made?
Hi. The messaging is great overall, but I can see how if the key message was delivered without the supporting, it sounds potentially discriminatory as opposed to what we're going for here.
Can you say a little more?
Yeah, just influence who can live, work, and thrive in our communities. I could just as easily go to this is opening up who could live here, and to this is limiting who can live here. So I just think it's a word choice.
Yeah. No, thank you. I just want to make sure I understood. Yeah, thank you.
Super.
Yeah, no, it's important. As you think about all four messages, was there one that kind of spoke more directly to you? Are there, as some of you have brought up, are there values or different messages that you feel are important that aren't conveyed or covered in any of this messaging? Maybe if you could only lead with one, what would you pick? Leah, you have a hand behind you.
Maybe not answering your question directly, but that's back to just overall themes. It seemed like there was a lot of reference to generational transitions and folks currently living in the county and being able to remain. But Lancaster County has a long history of being a welcoming community and welcoming new neighbors. And I didn't see that messaging represented in any of the themes, recognizing that bringing that into the conversation does add an extra layer of complication. But I think it's an important piece of Lancaster's identity. Yeah, should be represented in some way.
Yes, thank you for that.
Hi, just playing off the last comment, I think it's also important to note that although we're a welcoming community, more than somewhere between 60 and 70% of our growth is just by people who are already living in Lancaster County having kids, and those kids growing up here and wanting to remain here. So we see a lot of comments, particularly in social media, about keeping those people from New Jersey and New York out of our community. We don't need more traffic. It's not just people who want to move here from outside. It's also growth from within.
Thank you.
I kept wondering how some of the messaging ties into how housing supports small business. And I don't know if I've seen that throughout any of the messaging.
Right.
Which is a big deal in Lancaster.
Yeah, thank you. Good point.
Given all the talk about the housing, I'm sure this is at the top of most of the local leaders also. They are fully aware of it. The question I have is, what do they think about? What are the solutions, and what are these messages? I would expect these messages are in line with what the local leaders are also thinking. So the question is really how do you merge what the constraints they have to your messaging?
Yeah, and that's part of the campaign as well, as we've chosen, and I should have brought the list, we've chosen 10 focal communities that kind of are inside of the urban growth boundaries that have some comprehensive planning already going on or already looking to make some changes to really kind of test some of this with them and to go in and share some of these messages. So we've done now a lot of kind of relationship building with those community or those municipalities and getting to know them and what their needs are and their concerns are. And so our next kind of round of engagement is really to kind of go back and say, okay, here are some resources, here are some messages to try your next planning commission meeting or your next zoning hearing, what can we do to help you and provide some examples. We just had a nice conversation with East Lampeter. Some of you may be aware that they've really been working on their zoning. And we're going to offer that up as a case study so that other municipalities can see themselves reflected in East Lampeter's kind of journey and some of the strategies that they've undertaken. So it's not something that we've quite done intentionally yet, but that's kind of the next phase of this work, is to really take some of this back, saying kind of, this is what we heard while we were talking with you. Does this resonate? Is this what you see too? Go ahead, Chad. Yep.
Yeah, if I could just to add a couple thoughts to that. That's a really great question. And I think it invites also just a little bit of backdrop of how the coalition has gotten to where we are. So over the last couple of years, in addition to working our way toward this, or in some ways, part of what has undergirded working toward this kind of campaign is based on a pretty concerted effort to reach out to as many local municipal leaders as we've been able to over the last couple of years. So I think that has always been a role that the coalition has sought, is when local elected and appointed officials are looking for kind of a thought leader or a partner around housing issues, the coalition trying to kind of show up and be available for that. But over the last, I'd say 2 to 3 years, we've really made a concerted effort to reach out as much as we could. So many of you would be aware that the High Foundation did a couple sessions on kind of housing issues, specifically targeting municipal officials about 2 years ago. They did that 2-day-long deliberative workshops specifically for municipal leadership. And between those two, I think of the 60 municipalities, they had something like participation from 35 of them. And we did follow-up work with each of those, kind of using that as an opportunity to reach back out to all the folks who had gathered in those settings and say, hey, you know, one of the ways you concluded your time together was to say, we believe there's more we can do in the next 18 months in our local setting around these issues. So we sort of followed up and said, great, we would like to take you up on that and see how we can be helpful to you. So we have been getting around and listening with as many municipal leaders as we can. So I would say everything that you see today reflects that kind of listening work. Some of that has happened with Samantha involved, some of that preceded her time. And I'd say over the last 2 years, we've maybe had interactions with something like 15 to 20 municipalities directly as representatives from the coalition. So, you know, that's by no means everybody. That's like a third or a quarter, but we're beginning to do as much of that outreach as we can. And out of that listening, identified this list of 10 that we think are in a real position, either because they specifically are saying we're kind of revisiting our zoning and saldo ordinances and we want some input on how we can be more housing friendly, or they're strategically located in the county in areas where we believe they really carry kind of a special responsibility to do more around housing. So we've identified 10. That's really where some of the focus of this campaigning will be. Doesn't mean there's not housing need in every municipality in Lancaster County, but we're just kind of working within what's our best kind of strategic reach, given our current capacity.
We have a comment over here.
I appreciate the themes that you're suggesting here today. One thought that came to my mind is the importance of collaboration and positive working between the providers of housing, and the things that you mentioned here focus a lot on municipalities. I'm wondering if any statement could be incorporated into that concept, whether it be private contractors, that kind of thing, or even nonprofits that are providing housing. The importance of the relationship and collaboration, positive working together, that kind of thing.
Yeah, no, that's great too. And that's part of some of the one-pagers and toolkits that we're developing. So the one-pagers, we're looking for ones that are targeted to municipal leaders, one that is targeted to community members, and one that is targeted to nonprofits and community-based folks that are just kind of looking to work at this and pick away at it. So we are trying to kind of look at the different spaces and places, different stakeholder groups that we can really engage to kind of move the work forward. But I appreciate that as a piece of feedback. I'm not sure what time it is. Okay, yeah, so any other questions? We don't have to talk about this specifically if you don't want to, but any other kind of questions that you have generally?
Man, you guys framed this so well. Good job. Appreciate that. Keep relaying the message. I did have a kind of in the weeds question about it. I don't know if you'll have the stats. About 5 years ago or so, there was a conversation about the fact we had about 10,000 units shortage of rentals, apartment rentals. And by my crude counting, in the past 5 years, we've built about 10,000 on a countywide level. Have you guys had any update on that, or any status on where the multifamily market is?
The simple answer is I don't think anyone is thoroughly tracking that across the county currently. I would say something I have been saying like everywhere where folks may listen is we need someone to take the lead in Lancaster County on how to collect and count that data kind of year over year. I was in a workshop a couple years ago with folks from Montgomery County, and one of the things I was really impressed with, they had done some similar work around some strategic planning and then working on a really robust public-facing campaign that was about generating more just kind of public awareness and kind of public goodwill toward more housing opportunities in their community. But one of the things they're doing is every year one of their county agencies is publishing a data sheet on where we at with housing production. You know, that means first identifying the need, which we've made some attempts at that in Lancaster County. There have been numbers, kind of ballpark numbers in thousands. EDC has tried to do some work around that, but I don't think we have any number that everybody has sort of said like, yeah, this is the need that we all sort of agree is where we're at. And then we just frankly don't yet have the capacity to be tracking toward that. The city's doing a pretty good job. I think there are some other there's some pieces that the county planning department is beginning to track more holistically. They, by the way, I should say, have launched a really great data site on the county planning department website that does track a lot of housing related information, as well as some other types of data, municipality by municipality, as well as countywide data. It's a fantastic tool. So I think we're like on the cusp, but we need somebody really measuring against like, what's our goal and how do we know when and how we're making progress against that goal in a numeric way? We're just not there yet in Lancaster. Yeah.
Maybe Midwest to the light side is the house not that in there.
Yeah, totally. I mean, some data points we do know. I mean, for any of you who were at the State of the County presentation that Diana Martin did a few months ago, one of the slides she had up was tracking that, yes, in fact, countywide housing production actually has outpaced growth over the last decade. But there are a couple key factors in why that's not enough. One, we were like really, really behind from like 30 years of lag before that. And family types are changing while our housing types have largely remained stagnant, including what we continue to build. And so like there's this mismatch, and we have aging housing stock. So yes, we've been in kind of a building boom the last decade, but that's going on while aging housing stock, more and more of it is going offline because of just the challenges of maintaining it. So we have some data points, but to my knowledge, I mean, others in the room may know better. I don't know. John, what do you know of being tracked around kind of numbers?
First, thank you for the shout out to the dashboard.
Do what I can.
But earlier this year, we started tracking from the subdivision land development plans that the county planning department receives. We've been tracking the number of units of various types, as well as the amount of square footage for non-residential uses such as commercial and industrial. And so far, during the first 7 months of 2026, single-family housing is way down compared to last year, and multifamily housing is going up. Unfortunately, we still, I think, only have 2 ADUs proposed throughout the entire county for 2026, and hopefully we'll see more of those, but we are beginning to track that as well.
Yeah. Great. So maybe we can all look to our county planning department to add to their dashboard and be able to track this kind of granular data, because I think it's really important. I mean, how do we know if we're succeeding if we don't like have the numbers? That's really hard. Any other general questions?
Thank you. That's great information there. Our team at the Treasury Department mainly focuses on economic development and workforce development. And this year, the conversation all goes the same. It starts off there, it goes in emerging technology, and it ends at data centers. And an interesting tactic I've heard from leaders across the state is we're leveraging this thirst for our beautiful central PA green grass to create affordable housing. So Google, you want that parcel of land? Okay. We're going to either keep it mixed use, we're going to change it to mixed use, and you're going to have to allow a developer to come in and do, and you're going to do that. We're not going to look for it. Or maybe there's this parcel on the other side. You're going to buy that too. And now you're going to find a developer and do what you're going to, or you're going to sell it for near market value. Has there been any talks of leveraging those data center conversations to create?
Is anybody in Lancaster County talking about data centers? No.
I'm kidding. Right. Yeah.
I'm kidding. I mean, I haven't heard of that locally. I mean, clearly I haven't, to be honest, I don't know in detail the city's community benefits agreement that they made around the current data center development in the city. I don't know if do others in the room know if there are others currently going on in the county? I haven't heard of others other than one in the city. And I think that's a great point. I mean, my goodness, we can add this to the list of ongoing discussions, right? Around like pros, cons, really scary things about having data centers in our community. But hopefully at a minimum, going forward, communities are savvy about if this is coming to our community, because we may or may not have a great deal of choice about whether it does, how many community benefit strings can we attach to that and put those, wealthy companies on the hook for that? That would be my take. That's maybe not everybody's take in the room, but that'd be my take.
For the sake of time, I just want to read a couple of comments that we got from people on the live stream. And perhaps maybe we can address them quickly, close up, and then we just have it on record what their questions were. Maybe more economic development messaging would add clarity and connection to the business community. That's one. Focusing on areas with growth pressures with existing infrastructure and amenities. Someone else said, a while back there was talk of developing more structures that were like the rooming houses of the olden days where people could rent a room and share a few common spaces. Big missing link, I think. And then finally, occupancy limits from long ago are one of the biggest barriers to shared housing. There's a bill at the state level, House Bill 2109, that would expand occupancy and allow more shared housing arrangements. So just wanted to share those and reflect those with you all.
Yeah, I mean, I think our response is probably yes to all of this from the coalition's perspective. We haven't led with a lot of talk about rooming houses, but I think certainly among our coalition, there's an appreciation for the role that rooming house and or single resident occupancy facilities could play in helping add more solutions to the table. All right, so wrap up. Do you have wrap up next?
I wrap up. Just thank you all. We really appreciate your time and attention. Our contact information is here. The QR code will take you to our website where you can sign up if you want to become a member of the coalition. It's real easy. You just sign up. And then we do about a third of the year, we do some newsletters, and then every other month we meet, and you're welcome. Anyone is welcome. You don't have to be a member to come, but we invite you all to join us for that. And certainly if you have any additional feedback or thoughts, like I do sometimes when I'm driving, walking, whatever, again, our contact information is there. If you'd like to reach out directly, we'd be happy to.
And can I add another call to action?
Yes.
Like a part B. So becoming a member is great. That certainly helps us. It really is easy. Basically, it's like if you're on the email list, you're a member. I don't know how that feels to you, but you can try that. I will say a key piece of this is we're working our way toward launching this campaign. And I think a key piece will be an invitation to both individuals as well as businesses, organizations, institutions to lend their name in some kind of pledge saying, yes, I want to be part of the Neighbors for Housing campaign as a way to sort of build a sense of community buy-in and momentum to this. So I would say watch for that. Certainly when anyone who joins the coalition's email list as a member in the short term, that kind of keeps you in the loop about all that, and you will be the first ones then invited to kind of join in that campaign. But we'll be looking for that, and I'm looking around at folks in the room, and regardless of how near and dear housing is to your heart or your company or organization's mission, if that's a like campaign pledge that you feel like you'll be able to get behind, I would certainly invite you to be thinking about that down the road. Doesn't mean you'll be asked to like do many things. It will simply be saying like, this is something I really believe in, or this is something my business believes in for our community's well-being. So thank you all. Really great to see you.
Thank you again, Samantha and Chad. I really appreciate it. Finally took me up on my request for people to do a little work in progress because I think we have a really great audience here. So thanks for your feedback. As always, a video of today's forum will be available next week. So by Wednesday, you should have that. And all of the resources that they shared will also be sent out. So how to get involved and stay engaged as well. Diana Martin's ears must be ringing today because I also will share, she is presenting for us next month. So if you're interested in learning about the Partners for Environmental Stewardship Sunnyside Peninsula, she will be here sharing some blueprints and progress on that project. So stay tuned for the dates. We will not be hosting a forum during the holiday weekend. We'll be here on September 11th, so not the first Friday of the month. But we'll be excited to see you back here. And thank you all. Have a great weekend.